Take a look at this 25-year stock market journey for MTNL. What do you see here? A business that gave exponential returns to its investors in the first few years. This is what I call the wealth building or the growth phase. This is followed by a phase where the stock consolidated first and then lost a lot of its value. This is what I call the wealth destruction phase because the stock became a penny stock by the end of 2019. But from 2020 onwards, we start to see a turnaround, almost a 500% increase in the stock price of MTNL. But based on this, will you really say that this is a turnaround? Should you invest in MTNL's stock given the current situation? What are the financials looking like? What are the risks involved in this stock? And finally, what is my personal recommendation on the MTNL stock? All of that and much more, let's find out in this video. Let us now talk about the growth phase of MTNL. But first things first, MTNL is a subsidiary of BSNL that provides telecom services in Mumbai and in Delhi. Now, if you come back to this chart, MTNL's stock was listed in the market at a price of 171 rupees. Within a span of 5 years only, this stock hit a high of 380, which is a growth of 122% in a span of 5 years. If you look in yearly terms, the compounded annual growth rate CAGR amounts to 17%. That's the kind of returns this stock gave to its investors during 1995 to 2000. But what was the reason behind the same? Now understand this. There was a time in India when private players were not allowed in this segment. MTNL had a 100% market share at that point of time. Naturally, they were providing all kinds of services, voice, calls, data, and even went on to extend their portfolio to wireless services, pager services, even voicemail services. And that is why the kind of effect of all of this is reflected in the stock price movement as well. They gathered a huge amount of big deals which strengthened both their top line as well as their bottom line. So it is safe to say that they were enjoying a massive bull run in the market. But this dream run had to come to an end. What happened post 2000? Let's find out. Take a look at this chart that shows their journey from 2000 up until 2020. For the most part, the stock hovered in the range of 100 to 150, but eventually this movement fizzled out, and by the end of 2019, MTNL was reduced to a penny stock and it had hit an all-time low of 5 rupees. Who is to blame for all of this? Poor government policies or entry of new private players? All the governments starting from 2000 till 2020 wanted private players to flourish in this area because the government would then benefit by selling the spectrum rights to these private players and they will garner massive revenues from these players. So government policies were in favor of those private players and not towards the expansion of MTNL. For example, MTNL had its hugely popular pager services which were halted by the government. MTNL was not allowed to expand as aggressively as the other private players were. MTNL at one point of time was even not allowed to participate in the spectrum sale as well. The fourth point here is that the overseas business of MTNL was hived off, converted into a separate entity called VSNL, and the revenues from there were pocketed by the government and not by MTNL. These combined factors played a major role in the downfall of MTNL, and that is reflected in their stock price movement as well. Now you combine it with the fact that this was an area, this was a space where private sector started to flourish. Vodafone, Idea, Airtel, and finally Reliance Jio came in and garnered massive amount of market share in this segment, and MTNL continuously had a declining market share to the extent that it has a 1% market share only in the telecom sector. Now, the impact of all of this was also reflected in their financials. Take a look at their revenue growth for the past 5 to 6 years. What do you see here? a continuously declining trend, which also confirms the fact that their market share was constantly eroding. They were continuously losing customers, which is why their revenue was not growing at all. If you talk about the profit, take a look at this chart. You will understand that they were a loss making company. They still are. And if a company is not able to make profits for the past 6, 7, 8 years, then this just goes to show that the financial health of this company is not good at all. But in spite of all of this, after 2020, we did see the stock jumping by over 400 to 500 points. What was the reason behind that? Let's find that out. Now take a look at this chart. From a low of 5 rupees in 2019, the stock hit a high of 38 rupees in 2022. In a span of 2 years, the stock jumped by 7x, which is close to 600% returns. Amazing returns generated in such a short span of time, right? But while it did hit a high of 38 rupees, post that the stock is again continuously falling down. It is currently trading in the range of 20 to 26 rupees, and the reason why it was able to give this turnaround from 5 rupees to 38 rupees was when the government announced that it has a whole revival plan for MTNL. To be very honest, I am not at all convinced about this plan because the private players have garnered massive share already in this particular segment. Yes, the government policies can still help MTNL gain some sort of a market share, but I don't see private players, private consumers like you and me switching to an MTNL, leaving our traditionally strong telecom players such as Vodafone and Airtel. Now that you have a brief idea of why this turnaround happened, let us take a look at what is my personal recommendation for the MTNL stock. To be honest, I am extremely bearish on this particular business. Yes, it is a government owned business and the government policies can really help them gain the market share. But I am not at all convinced that there will be a complete reversal of their business. The profits are not at all there in their income statement. The revenue is continuously declining on a year-on-year basis. The debt also is piling up on their balance sheet. There are a lot of challenges that MTNL currently faces, and just an announcement that government has a revival plan does not convince me to buy this particular stock. Also, if you look at this particular space, Reliance Jio and Airtel have established a duopoly in this segment. These two players have garnered more than 80% market share as of now, and given the kind of trends, I do expect that these two players will continue to dominate in this segment. So a couple of percentage points increase in the market share of MTNL is not going to overnight improve its positions. Still, if you are someone who wants to invest in this stock, please do so at your own risk. This is an extremely volatile stock with poor fundamentals and with no signs of recovery in the near future. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the analysis of MTNL stock. Do subscribe to Finance Lens and I'll see you the next time.